It's social, it's work. Oh, no, it's also. Yeah, I know, but I have one else. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Brandis. I'm the chair of the Rules Advisory Committee, and
my name is Esther Lynn, and I'm the interim chair of the Law School Council.
And this is a joint meeting of the Rules Advisory Committee and the Law School Council. And we will conduct the meeting by sort of switching from one meeting to the other as we conduct our conversations over the course of the day. And we'll try to indicate to all present when things are happening and when that's the case. I'll also try to lean closer to the microphone because I've been advised that that's necessary. So we will traditionally begin with a call for public comment. Mr. Leal, Dean Leal. And any others? Any other requests for comment? All right, so we have a schedule constraint today in that we have Dr. P, who just arrived a moment ago, and he will have a particular presentation was scheduled for the chairs for the staff report later in the meeting. We're going to adjust the agenda so that Dr. P can make his presentation now, and we'll get him out of here for another meeting. First things first, however, I guess we have to call the roll, don't we? I missed that part.
Yes, so I will ask Kimberlyn to please call the roll, including the members that are appearing via notice on the phone.
And let's start with just the RAC to keep it all clear. Call the RAC roll first.
For the RAC members, Dean Barbieri.
Present.
Gregory Brandes.
Here.
Jackie Gardina.
Here.
Esther Lynn.
Here.
For the Law School Council members, Kevin Johnson, Lisa Kolpenberg.
Here.
Esther Lynn,
Here.
Joanna Mendoza,
Here.
Susan Westenberg Prager,
Here.
Robert Strauss.
Here.
That concludes the roll.
All right, so and just to confirm, we do have a quorum for the RAC. The RAC is 4 members, the president, 4 present.
And we have the quorum for the Law School Council.
Terrific. So now, I've got the call for public comment listed, or I made that request for the RAC. Is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment to the RAC for this meeting? And seeing none, I may allow it again later on a given issue, depending on how our time works. Call for public comment.
Any public comments for the Law School Council? Also none, and an opportunity may arise later for it.
All right. Now, given the timing of our presentations here, let me suggest that we move right into Ron P's presentation, if you're ready. And we'll come back to chair's reports and so on after that presentation. And I'm reliably informed I've been mispronouncing his last name, which is B, not P. My apologies.
Good afternoon. By the way, I go by Ron, and that's the easiest.
We're having a little trouble hearing you. The microphone is definitely on.
I think it's on. Can you hear me all right?
Not on the speakers.
Okay.
So speak loudly.
I'm going to give you some updates about the bar exam studies. There's been quite a few of those studies. Last year we launched 4 studies, and I'm going to give you the update on the last of the series that was launched last year, which is the performance study involving gathering student and credential information from 11 ABA participating schools. And another study is the continuation of all of the 4 studies that were launched last year, which is job analysis study. And I'm just in the middle of actually participating in yet another bar exam related study just next door involving researchers from Indiana University looking at the productive mindset intervention program. By the end of next week, we will have some results about the impact of the psychological intervention on the performance of the bar exam. So that's yet another one. But today, limited to just the 2. First, related to the performance study, well, we have a lot of data about student credentials, starting from pre-admission, undergraduate GPA, LSAT scores, as well as credentials during the law school, first year GPA, final year GPA, all of those. But the design of the study is based on a few of the primary research questions that provide guidance about the sequence of analysis and the key research questions we want to get from this rich data set. You can look at just 2 basic questions. One is to see to what extent there has been any changes, if any, in the student characteristics between bar exam applicants in the 3 administrations of the bar exam that we were looking at, starting from 2013, 16, and 17, those 3 years. So we have the information about the bar exam as well as student characteristics. After that descriptive analysis to see whether there are any differences among the 3 cohorts, then to see to what extent the changes in student characteristics have any impact on the performance of the bar exam. So with the draft final report now, we're going through the review process. I can give you some key findings about the study. One is there are some changes in the exam scores, whether it's the total scale score, MBE, or the pass-fail status. Some of those changes in the results of the bar exam could be explained by changes in the student characteristics. And among all of those student characteristics and credentials, last year, law school credential has the greatest predictive power on the performance of the bar exam. This is probably not anything surprising. Although the additional analysis we're getting into is to tease out the fairly complex relationship between undergraduate and LSAT scores and the bar exam performance, because the law school experience as measured by law school TPA, that's kind of a moderating effect. So we're going through some additional analysis based on feedback from participating law school deans. And regardless the set of factors we look at, through all the models we look at in the relationship between these credentials and bar performance, there's a fairly large percentage of the variations that's not explained by the variables we have. So these are the key findings. There are some influence, but then there's a large portion of the changes that's not explained by the model as based on the information we collected. So as mentioned, the current status, we're going through some additional analysis based on the feedback from law schools, and we expect to go through some additional rounds of analysis, feedback, and edits of the report. I expect that process to be completed within a month or so, optimistically. So the second study, we started planning on this study fairly early. First, involving applying for a grant to fund the study, selection of the consultant to conduct the study, and because of the methodology involved in this study, goes beyond the traditional survey in job analysis. So we're using two survey methods. One is traditional method, the other is what's called experience sampling survey that requires a different kind of a software package to be able to send out notifications to survey participants. We also identify the software to implement this survey. And the third element in this planning process is to create a working group to provide guidance and feedback to the study. And we have completed the recruitment selection of the working group members. Currently, we have already planned for the first working group meeting scheduled to occur on 19th of this month. So we're in the process of preparing the meeting agenda, all of the meeting materials to introduce to the working group members the process of this study and some of the key elements of the study. And the key research questions or the ultimate goal of the study is try to come up with a clearly articulated relationship or connection between the bar exam content and the current legal practice. Because this study will give us a very comprehensive information about the legal practice using both survey methods. And based on the results, we'll also be able to develop a more comprehensive definition of what constitutes minimum competence that will inform, when necessary, the evaluation of the pass line. And in addition to the pass line or minimum competence associated with that, it will also allow us to have an assessment of the adequacy of the current exam format. Because the practice information will ask a lot of questions about the complexity of the tasks, the kinds of knowledge that's required, based on the practice, it will inform us to look at what's the best exam format to tap into those required skill sets and knowledge. With all of these, the blueprint is something that we can use to identify and plan for what needs to be included in the bar exam in the future. So that's a series of planning and implementation activities that will be informed by the results of this study. In terms of timeline, after the working group meeting, right after that, we'll get into the planning stage to develop the survey, identify the sampling strategy and the sampling pool for the two survey methods. So sometime in February or March, we'll convene a panel group to begin to develop the survey question items, which is largely related to identification, organization, classification, and description of tasks that will be part of the survey questions. So after the completion of that task and knowledge domain items as the basis for the survey, we'll go through a series of pilot tests for both survey method sometime in May or June, and then we would expect to formally distribute the survey in August next year. And based on the survey results, after taking a few months to analyze the results, we would expect to have the final report completed by the end of the year. Any questions? So that's the high-level overview of these two bar exam studies.
All right, so let's start out by. Let's begin by taking questions from RAC members. Do you have any questions from the RAC members? Dean Gardina.
Thank you. And I understand the performance study, what you're focused on were the characteristics of the bar takers. I'm just curious if you factored in over time the changes to the exam itself, such as did the addition of civil procedure to the MBE have an effect? Did the change in the structure in California have an effect? Did the weight given to various parts of the exam have an effect?
Now, the study, to answer that kind of question, the focus of the study would really have to look at the specific items on the exam and then look at the different performance on individual question items. That was not the design of the study. The outcome variable in the analysis is really just looking at the total scale score and but without looking at the individual question items, be able to answer that kind of question about possibility of changes in the exam.
So Ron, let me just make sure that I understood your answer just a second ago correctly. Is it really just the MBE score that's being examined for these changes over time, or is it the combined score on the California exam?
Anything related to bar exam performance, primarily total scale score and pass-fail outcome. But we also went beyond that to look at the MBE written score and even the individual written questions. But going through all of those analyses, what's clear is that the measurement itself sometimes has an impact on the kinds of relationship you can find. So MBE, because it's multiple choice, there are more questions, you tend to be able to find more robust relationship between that kind of measurement than written exam. So at the end, a lot of analysis focus on total scale, which is anchored on MBE and the pass-fail results. A lot of additional analysis on individual questions in the written didn't yield as much findings as we had expected.
Interesting. All right, other questions from RAC members? I do have one more for you, Ron, actually. And it was regarding a correlation of final year law school GPA to, and can you just describe specifically what that correlates to? Is that the pass-fail outcome, the total scaled score? What is that strong relationship?
Both.
May I ask,
Again,
is it really the final year GPA or the cumulative at the end of?
final year cumulative.
So it's
Yeah,
not
so-
just the final.
Yeah, it's not just
That
the
was the
final.
other question. So it's the cumulative GPA for all of law school, not just the GPA for the last year of law school. Okay, so it's cumulative GPA.
Cumulative.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I interrupted your answer, but I think that was needed to be clarified.
It did. That was part of the question. So the specific strong correlation, I'll just restate what I understand, is between the cumulative GPA attained during the JD program, during
That's correct.
the full sweep of the program, with both the pass-fail outcome and, of course, naturally, the two go together, the total scaled score.
That's correct.
And Ron, just to explore that a little bit further, did that relationship exist both at the top and bottom end of the total scaled score range? Or was it something more specific among passers and not failers? In other words, was it pretty comparative across the range, or were there differences that were interesting there?
It's a fairly straight line, linear kind of relationship. It's over the entire range. You might be thinking, gathering that kind of data in a different context to where the number of cases might have a more limited range, then you might see a different kind of relationship. But the participating schools from the 11 ABA schools, the range is fairly wide in both the last year cumulative GPA as well as the total scale score in the ME. So that allows us to look at the entire range of the relationship, and that's a fairly linear kind of relationship.
So if a person did relatively poorly in law school, let's say a C student in law school, then it's likely to have predicted a non-passing score beneath 1440 anyway on the exam. Do you have a sense of sort of what a C predicted in terms of total scaled score?
The results shows where the cutoff will be, but I don't remember. Because of the linearity of that relationship, it's pretty easy to identify where that threshold will be.
Okay. Well,
Although I should caution, the law school credential as a measurement is different than LSAT and bar exam total score because it's not standardized. It varies across school. It might also vary over time in terms of the underlying ability that's being measured. So the data that we had actually made adjustments on the law school GPA using LSAT as an anchor, but there's only so much that adjustments can be made on the law school GPA. There's still a lot of noises if you look across the years and across individual schools in terms of the reliability of the different ranges measuring the same underlying ability.
All right, so now you've opened another can of worms that I have to ask a question about. I'm sorry for dominating. If anybody else has more, certainly jump in. Again, on the rack. If I understand correctly, it sounds as though law school GPA was equated across the schools based on LSAT scores. Is that
Adjusted,
correct?
I wouldn't
Did
say
I understand that?
equated is a term that the psychometricians use to describe a more rigorous process of adjustments. And this adjustment is used the median of the LSAT score over the 3 cohorts. So there's only limited adjustments you can make to calibrate the accuracy of law school GPA.
Okay, all right, I think I understand. It's a very interesting issue for me, Ron, because what we haven't seen in law schools in general over this same period is a dramatic change in the overall grading structures for the graduating cohorts. And so it's curious that, it would be curious to see that pattern erupt here when it hasn't really happened in the law schools. And of course, there's various arguments for why that might be the case, that the schools are scaling or they're putting everybody on a forced curve. There's various explanations for the question. If the pool of applicants was declining in quality, then law school grades should decline apace with the decline in quality in a measurable fashion. And in general, that, I don't know if perhaps the study showed that, but that hasn't been my experience.
Whatever decline in, as measured by LSAT and undergraduate GPA, we don't see a proportional change in the law school GPA. That's an indication of possibility of grading on the curve as a normal practice. It's also an indication it's probably a legitimate way of doing it because it's not a standardized test across schools and over time. So invariably you would find that kind of a noise that you have to make some effort to control for, and there's only so much you can control. In addition to making that adjustments, the modeling exercise also try to control for variations over time across schools.
It's just fascinating to have those two things going on at the same time. In other words, number one, law school cumulative GPA has a very close relationship to bar passage. And number two, law school cumulative grading hasn't really changed. Yet the bar passage rate has declined dramatically. So it's a very curious circumstance to have both of those things going on at the same time. Doesn't make a lot of logical sense to me that that could be possible. So I just plant the seed, and I'm very interested to see what the report is able to provide to us in the way of information about that, because it doesn't seem to line up like it should. Something else must be going on, and as you've indicated, there are unexplained factors. So,
Great.
yes.
Whereas there's, I don't know what the numbers are, of course, but whereas there's a strong correlation between law school cumulative GPA and success on the bar examination, I believe that the results are going to show if the top 25% of a certain law school had been performing at a certain level, but from exam to exam to exam, the percentage of the top 25% of a particular law school is going to decline as the bar results go down. I didn't say that well, but let's say 10 years ago, the top 25% of law school A was scoring at 85% first-time bar passage rate. When the bar results go down, the top 25% of that same school probably is not going to perform at 85%, but more like 70 or 75%. So, but it's still going to look like there's a high correlation, but they're not going to be passing at the same rate.
So if it was done based on percentage of class rank only, that would make sense to me. If it's actual GPA, and GPAs have not changed over time, then the relationship is broken. Something is not working. If it was strictly based on class rank, then it would make sense. Of that, the class rank of that top 25%, you can, yes, that works. But if that top 25% still has the same GPA from law school, something else must be going on. Because that doesn't explain the changing outcomes.
And Ron, when you looked at the statistics, were you looking at the score that the particular applicant achieved on the bar exam or just their pass-fail status? Because there's gonna be a lot of people, if passing is 1440, then you're gonna have people in the 1600s.
Yep.
That now maybe that same GPA is not getting a 1600 on the bar examination, but they're getting 1490. They're still passing,
Right.
but their overall score is gonna be declining.
So they don't change on the pass-fail correlations. They do change on the score correlations. Fascinating. Ron, thank you for the work on that, and the report. I'll hand it over to the law school counsel for questions and conversation.
Do we have any questions or comments on from the law school council members?
This is Susan Prager from Southwestern. Ron, are you at the point where you are able to tell us in rough terms what percentage of the decline is attributable to declined entering credentials?
Not really, because entering credential analytically is very difficult to isolate when you have the law school credential being part of the student characteristics. So that was the puzzling aspect when we broke it out in the analysis, and the results when you look at independently the relationship between entering credential and law school credential. What it revealed is more a kind of a confounding, mediating effect of law school credentials based on whatever entering credentials students have. So that's still something in terms of interpretation we need to sort out, as well as statistically trying to clarify the somewhat puzzling pattern that we saw. Part of the reason when you have the analysis focused on the two different sets of variables, as well as when you combine them, which is more accurately reflecting the overall student ability when you have both measures. The different directions the results we're seeing is an indication of what I earlier mentioned about the non-standard measure of law school credential, but to what extent we can actually control for the inevitable noise in that measurement, we don't have a clear sense. But so the interpretation has to be not only careful, but considering the nuance, the relationship between all of these complex factors. So to express that kind of relationship in terms of a single number, in terms of percentage, that could be attributed to one versus the other, instead of clarifying it, could be more misleading unless you have all of the background information about that relationship. That's what we're trying to get a better hold in the additional analysis and in consultation with law school deans to have a better understanding of what's going on.
Any other questions from the law school council members?
All right. Well, I guess we'll thank you, Ron, and appreciate your help and contributions, and look forward to the results of a really interesting study.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll sort of return to our regular agenda. And at this time, I guess we'll take the public comment. And so, Dean Leal, you've reserved a bit of time. Is there?
No, I was just waving to Ms. Cummins.
Oh, my mistake. Okay. Okay. Is there any other public comment then under those circumstances? And
Earlier, there were no public comments for the law school council. Are there any now? Seeing none.
so, chair's report is really our next item, and I'm just going to reserve a bit of time toward the end of the meeting for that, for my own sake, toward the end of the RAC meeting. Anything for the Law School Council?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. All right, that takes us then to the draft minutes of the meeting on August 23 that were posted. And so kind of back in the RAC, addressing to the members of the RAC. Were there any corrections, comments, any adjustments to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, do you mind if I substitute a roll call vote on this? Call that, we'll call that approved, for unanimously approved as it is. And then that brings us back to the staff update portion of our meeting. And the first topic on that is, were they joint minutes? I apologize for that. So off to Law School Council regarding minutes.
Any corrections to the minutes from last meeting for the Law School Council?
No.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Robert Strauss, so moved.
Thank you. Second?
Or you can move to substitute the roll call.
I'll move to substitute the roll call. Oh. If there are any objections. As long as there are no objections. Okay.
So your minutes are approved. And I apologize that I'd forgotten it was a joint meeting at the last time, so they're the same minutes. I was thinking, where's the other set of minutes? It's the same set, so my apologies. All right, well, then we're on bar examination results and allocation lists. And Christina, I'm sure that your presentation will be focused on mechanics of bar exam results being published and so on, as opposed to the more controversial topic of what happened on the bar exam.
Yes, thank you. I don't want
This
to address
time
those
around.
questions.
Yes. So let me introduce Christina Dole on the bar examination mechanics.
So the results, passing and failing, were released on Friday, November 16th to all of the applicants. And then a public pass list was made available that Sunday. And by now, all of the law school deans, all of you should have received your own allocation pass-fail list for the applicants that took the July California bar exam. We gave you 2 weeks to reply to the final allocation list as to whether any of the applicants on your list didn't look familiar or perhaps were not yours. I have just a few more schools that were in the middle of trying to square away their allocation list to make sure the appropriate applicants are allocated to their schools. And as soon as I can square away those schools, we will work on compiling the general statistics, which I know everybody likes to see those as well. The general statistics for any of the schools that have 11 or more exam takers will be posted publicly online, probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then, of course, you all will get an additional statistical breakdown for your individual law schools that will be mailed to you as well. Allocation list for the next coming up bar exam, which would be the February 2019, you shall get your preliminary allocation lists. Those allocation lists are any of the applicants that have said they intend to take the February 2019 bar exam. Those are released typically a month, maybe even 2 months prior to the bar exam. And we like everybody to review those lists to make sure those applicants are correctly allocated, because when it comes to the release of results, we just get one step closer to being accurate on that final allocation list. that's about all the update I have, but I would answer any questions if anyone had any.
I just have a question with regard to the answer books for the unsuccessful applicants. I don't know if that's directed to you or what students ask, and I always like to try and provide reliable information. Is there an estimated time for shipment?
Yes, we always try to get the books out 4 weeks after the release of results. So we are on schedule to release the books next Friday. I want to say it's December 14th. But next Friday, the books will be in the mail.
Thank you.
Yes.
So are there other questions from RAC members? Right, so I actually have a question which you may have already answered and I just didn't, I was taking notes, I may have missed it. Detailed results for individual schools that are public,
Yes.
in other words, with 11 or more,
Mhm.
are those included with the packet that the schools will get on their own detailed results? That was the way it was done on one occasion recently. Is that still the plan, or how is that?
We have not done it that way because it's posted on the website. Anyone can access that. However, the confidential data, the data that we do not redact, that's the information. It's usually a one-page breakdown. That's the information that the deans will receive shortly.
Okay, so the public stats will include the detailed information about individual schools as long as they had 11 or more
Exactly,
takers?
yes.
Or is it more than 11?
It's 11 on.
11 or more, okay. As long as they had 11 or more takers, that public statistic will be posted individually.
Yes.
There was a time a while back that I remember when somehow the media got hold of detailed school-by-school information before it was public to everybody through probably a FOIA request or something, I imagine. And then I think you sent out individual, just to remediate, and very much appreciated, you sent out the individual information. But that's not a regular plan. That's not, that was just a one-time.
That's correct.
All right. That's what I wanted to check. All right, anything else on the RAC?
How about the Law School Council? None?
Well, yes, now we've had, no, we're not supposed to do that after we've had our discussion. Well, let's see, this is staff report and questions to staff. I guess we could ask if there's anybody else who wants to make a public comment about this, and then have a discussion among the group. We're supposed to have a discussion after public comment, right? Doesn't look like anybody's jumping up right at the moment. On the mechanics, okay, all right, very good. Thank you, Christina, appreciate it. All right, so the next item on our agenda is a recap of the registrar's meeting. This time I'm gonna remember to do it the right way. Let's have our staff report, and then we'll pose and see if there's any comment, and then we'll go into our discussion.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. So just a quick update to remind people that we held the registrar's meeting as scheduled. We held one session north in San Francisco, one session south in Los Angeles. We had registrars from all of the categories of law schools attend, and we did a couple of new things this time. And I draw your attention to say that if there are things that you're looking for in future meetings, please do let me know so we can try to incorporate them. So this time we invited more people from eligibility, and that allowed to the registrars to hear from those folks, but also to ask individual questions about individual students afterward at the lunch period, and people enjoyed that. We also had a representative from the Lawyer Assistance Program talking about additional resources that are available to law students who may be experiencing or may have experienced addiction or substance abuse issues. So those were two of the new things that we tried this time that received good feedback. And that will continue to be an annual event that we'll do.
All right, so there's a staff report. Any public comment? Okay. Members of the RAC, comments, questions? All right, I have one, and that is that it's only me today. The Lawyer Assistance Program was very much appreciated by my registrar. something she didn't know about. And so thought that was really useful to understand, and also the opportunity to meet with some of the eligibility folks. So both of the things you tried were appreciated, at least by my personal experience. So, yeah.
Well, great news, thank you.
Yes, it's important to say those things. So thank you for the effort to get those folks together, and you give them all a valuable day. Appreciate it very much.
Any questions or comments from members of the Law School Council?
Okay, all right, well, we're gonna be done before we know it here. So we've had our update of the bar exam performance study. So now the status of law school accreditation and law school engagement, the proposal. And this, again, we'll do it this way, Amy, and then we'll take any public comment and we'll have our conversation.
All right.
Amy Nunez.
All right, thank you. So at its September 2018 meeting, the board took action on a variety of sub-entity Appendix I proposals. The board did not take any, did not act on proposals related to law school accreditation or engagement. Rather, attempt to gather more input and suggestions for a proposal. The executive director, and our chief of programs held 2 meetings, one in Southern California and one in Northern California, to meet with schools to discuss options or alternatives that could get in a revised proposal. As a result of those meetings, a preliminary proposal was shared by the executive director on October 16th. That an email went out to all deans, and the intent was to gather preliminary feedback in anticipation of developing a formal proposal for the board that's going into the January 2019 meeting. Since that point, the board is in receipt of the 23 law school signatories letter that provided feedback on that proposal, as well as comments from the 2 other law school deans. So what the State Bar plans is for staff to develop a proposal again for the January 2019 meeting. And there isn't much to report that's new since that proposal was circulated for initial feedback.
I'm sorry, I was taking notes again and I missed the very last part.
So
there's nothing new to report.
Nothing new to report since the circulation of the preliminary proposal.
Oh, the original proposal.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's see, so, and 2 other comments.
Yes.
And those comments, was that done through the formal public comment mechanism on the website, so those other comments would be available?
Yeah, it was not done through a formal channel since it was a preliminary proposal.
Yep.
So you're questioning whether we should circulate those?
Well, I'm just wondering if were they delivered to the board in connection with the board meeting?
Well, the meeting hasn't happened, so and we don't have a proposal since we've received that. So the idea is to gather that feedback. We're also waiting more feedback from like the Supreme Court and other stakeholders before we develop the formal proposal that's going to the board.
Okay, that's right. So the sequence was that the board did not consider this proposal in November, so they wouldn't have received, unless it was given by public comment by somebody else, they wouldn't have gotten those comments in the board materials because it wasn't on the agenda.
Yes.
All right, got it. I'm just wondering, where they are, or where they'll show up eventually, and that sort of thing. I assume that they will then show up in the board book for the January meeting when the board has it on their agenda?
Yeah, potentially
Most
we could
likely.
include those, yes.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure the public comment is public. Folks have access to it and understand what's in it. Obviously, I know that the comment by 23 deans was addressed as public comment at the board meeting in November. So that's in the record. It's just that the others are not, as far as I can tell. So
Okay, yeah.
if they were intended to be public comment, then they should be. So, okay. All right. So let's take public comment if there are any public comments on this particular issue. And Let me remind if anybody speaks that we do expect that you'll identify yourself before you begin speaking, that you'll turn on the microphone, which is located at the seat at the end of the table where public comment occurs, and so we can all hear you and everyone on the webcast is aware of who's speaking. Are there any public comment about the proposal? Or the status or the report? Okay, seeing none, let's go and ask if there's public comment.
Any public comments on behalf of the Law School Council? Also none.
Okay, so then we'll take it into our conversation and RAC first. Comments?
Yeah, Amy, I know that part of the process and part of what the State Bar staff was seeking is not just input from the law schools, but also from the legislature and from the court. And I'm wondering if all that feedback has been received and it's just a matter of now formulating proposals based on that feedback.
It's my understanding that we're still gathering that feedback from the legislature and from other stakeholders. So we're in that process at the moment.
And is there any sense of timing for when the proposal will be available? Will it be made public as part of the agenda, a full proposal, or will it just be itemized and then done through a slideshow?
It will be a formal proposal that'll appear on the agenda for the January meetings, which means it would have to be prepared 10 days prior to the meeting.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, other RAC discussion items?
Any questions or comments from members of the Law School Council? And I don't hear any, so.
Okay. All right, so then I'll just comment before we depart that item. The sooner, the most in advance that it's possible for that proposal, whatever it's going to be, presented to the board, that it's possible to share that with the stakeholders, that would be the best. I realize that it's not required to be published until 10 days before, but obviously we're all trying to work together on this, and it would be much appreciated if it was presented as soon as possible.
I mean, to clarify, would that be 10 days for the notice and 5 days for the item? But I think that's there's an attempt to do both.
All right.
And can I ask one more question?
Sure, yeah.
And I may have misunderstood or misheard. I had thought that at the last CBE meeting, because it obviously affects the CBE's role as it relates to policymaking and other engagement with law schools, that the CBE had requested an update. Will they be provided the same update we received today regarding the status of the proposals? Or is there a more developed proposal or conversation happening at the CBE meeting tomorrow?
No sense. This is the most recent status that we have altogether. So,
Okay, so the CBE will hear essentially the exact same thing, that there is no update and there is no formal proposal, and that if the CBE has
left the conference,
it will happen at least 10 days before the next board meeting, if not sooner, as Greg has requested.
yes.
Okay. All right, so I think that concludes that part of the staff report. We then have the status of the 2019 form for the 6061.7 disclosures required of law schools, and that's staffed by Natalie Lemon.
Sure. So many of you are used to getting that form a little bit earlier in the fall. This year we took some more time, partially because we made some changes to the format of the annual report, hopefully to make it easier for you. But also the last portion, number 8, on the disclosure, will be updated for the Cal schools. 8 is the bar passage area, and for the unaccredited law schools, they'll fill that out and calculate it just the same way that you always have since this requirement was instituted in 2017. But this time, the Cal schools will be asked to use their MPR score when reporting the bar passage rate. So you'll see that change when the forms are sent out next week. And as a courtesy for all of the registered unaccredited schools, they will receive the pass-fail lists for the previous 5 years, adjusted for the new definition of taker that was adopted this past spring. So you'll have those as a one-time courtesy for your reference.
Okay, that's terrific. Let's see, questions, well, wait, first, comment?
Comment on behalf of the Law School Council? Seeing none.
Seeing none. Our conversation among the RAC about,
Just a quick question, is the posting deadline still a January 1, 2 timeframe?
That certainly would be the goal, and people should feel comfortable to calculate as they always have. Nothing has changed in terms of the calculations, other than the Cal schools substituting the MPR, which is a number that you've already reported, and that was a part of the August agenda for the committee.
and just to make sure I got it right, the registered unaccredited schools are going to get the set of data again with the new definitions
Yes,
for the last 5 years so that they can calculate it most easily.
correct.
All right, what a great courtesy. And again, very much appreciate the work that's being done on that.
Thank you.
All right, that's 61.7. And that brings us to the last of our staff report items, which is the recap of the annual report process. And again, that's you, Natalie.
Sure. So every fall, all of the Cal accredited and registered unaccredited schools file annual reports. There's been excellent compliance with the deadline this year, and also excellent compliance with our transitional plan to move to reporting the results electronically, at this point on a thumb drive, eventually through our new computer system, but that will take some time. And we got some good feedback from the new format. I'm very interested in any feedback here or more likely outside because it's probably very technical, but hopefully the new forms were easier for you to use. We'd like you to spend more time teaching the students, less time wrangling with forms, but everyone did a great job. We appreciate the courtesy, the timeliness, the thoroughness, and the compliance.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, same routine. Any public comment in the room for the RAC, or online for the RAC? Directed to the RAC. I think that's why we're doing it this way, right? Directed to the body from whom it comes.
Any public comments on behalf of the Law School Council? And seeing none.
Okay, seeing none. Questions, comments, concerns from the RAC? All right, not seeing any.
Questions and comments from the Law School Council members? None.
All right. Now, I want to just put in the same admonition to all of the law schools who might be listening that in the process where changes were made to the form, where those changes were useful, not useful, when there were a couple of typos, I imagine you've gotten those. That feedback, not anything dramatic, just small things. Please do feed those back to the staff. Obviously, you can see an obvious commitment to make the form as good as possible and the process as easy as possible. So even though we didn't get them here, which is probably appropriate given their technical nature, let's make sure they do get to Natalie Leonard. All right, that's me admonishing. Enough for me admonishing. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of our formal agenda. I'm just going to say anything else from any member of the RAC. We're not allowed to talk about a lot of things that weren't on the agenda, but if anything else matters that are on the agenda. All right.
Anything else for the Law School Council? Hearing none.
So do I have a motion to adjourn the RAC?
You had said you wanted to reserve some time for the chair.
Oh, yeah, my chair's report. I'm running out of here before I complete my chair's report. My chair's report is very simple, and that is that given the probable likelihood that the RAC will evolve to something else, I'm going to repeat my appreciation that I offered the last time. It's been an honor to serve with all of you. It's been an honor to serve with those of you who are not present in the room or who are no longer on the committee. And it's been an honor to serve along with the staff. And assuming that I'm not involved in the next iteration, whatever that might be, I'll be in the audience. I'll be watching. So you're not rid of me, but you'll be rid of me in this role. So thanks very much, everyone. And I'll accept the motion to adjourn the RAC.
Well, with a comment of thank you for your leadership, I move to adjourn the RAC.
I'll second.
All right, everyone is, I assume, is in favor of that.
I second the comment as well.
That's kind. Thank you very much. RAC stands adjourned.
Is there a motion to adjourn the Law School Council?
This is Robert
Second.
Strauss. I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
Thank you. And
Second.
thank you. The meeting for the Law School Council is now adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
So the committee of Alzheimer's
Joanna Mendoza.
Has left the conference.
for the subcommittee, I'm just going to go to
Has left the conference.
We are,
Susan
I don't know
Prager.
why that
Has left the
separate agenda
conference.
that normally has,
Robert
when each
Strauss.
subcommittee happens,
Has
not
left the
on
conference.
on our website. I don't know what happened.